Welcome, students. Today we are going to do the second poem of your Flamingo, an elementary school classroom in slum, part 1. Since the poem is very long, so it has been divided into two stanzas, two parts with two stanzas each. So today we are doing the first part. An elementary school classroom in a slum. It's written by Stephen Spender, who was born on 28th February 1909 in Kensington in London, and he died on 16th July 1995 in Westminster in London. A British poet, novelist, and essayist who took keen interest in politics. He followed socialist school of thought and thus exposes the glaring gap and marginalization that occurs in our societies. He composed this poem earlier but published it in 1964 for the first time. He received knighthood in 1983 and he was appointed the Poet Laureate Consultant to the US Library of Congress in 1965. He was the first non-US to be appointed at this post. Now, what has he dealt with in this poem? That is the theme of the poem. He has actually concentrated on the themes of social injustice and class inequalities. In this poem, the poet describes the condition of the students of an elementary school situated in a slum area. He wants to draw attention of everyone towards these children so that their life can be improved and they may get trained to become good citizens rather than criminals. Here, he talks about two different and incompatible worlds. One, the world of rich and civilized, that is, the world of haves, the privileged children, and the other, the world of poor, illiterate, and malnourished, that is, of the have nots, the underprivileged children of the slum. Now, let's go on to the first stanza of the poem. Far, far from gusty waves, these children's faces, like rootless weeds, the hair torn round their pallor, the tall girl with her weighed down head, the paper seeming boy with the rat's eyes, the stunted, unlucky heir of twisted bones, reciting a father's gnarled disease, his lessons from his desk. At back of dim class, one unnoted, sweet, and young, his eyes live in a dream of squirrel's game in tree room other than this. Let's go line by line explanation. Far, far from gusty waves. Now, what are these gusty waves? Gusty means very fast. Waves actually may be dealing with the waves of the sea, but here it means these gusty waves is representing the children outside the slum world. Means they enjoy life, so the joys and jubilations of those children. These slum children are far away from those joys and jubilations, and these children's faces like rootless weeds. So the faces of these children of the slum are compared to rootless weeds. The comparison is there, the faces are compared with rootless weeds, so it is a simile. Now, what does the poet mean, or what does he want to convey by comparing them with rootless weeds? We know weeds. Weeds are unwanted plants. Rootless, who do not, which are not firm and who do not get proper nourishment. So, if we compare, if we put this in the children, these children are also unwanted in the society and they are malnourished. So, you can understand the simile. These children's faces like rootless weeds. The hair torn round their pallor mean they are very unkept. Hair is scattered on the face. Why the word pallor is being used? Because the faces are very pale. And why they are pale? Because of malnourishment. Now, the poet talks about a few children in the classroom. Classroom of which? The elementary school of the slum. The first child he talks about is a tall girl with her weighed down head. Now, weighed down head. It doesn't mean that she's carrying some weight on her head, but it is weighed down means she's burdened. Burdened with what? Maybe poverty, maybe responsibilities. So this girl, she has a very dull appearance on her face and she's burdened with poverty and responsibilities. Then he talks about a boy, the paper seeming boy. We know paper is very thin. So here the comparison of the boy, how is the boy? The boy is as thin as paper. But it is not written the boy like the paper. It's written paper seeming boy. So it is a metaphor. With rat's eyes. Now, rat. You've seen rats moving around in the house. It seems as if they are always in a search of something. So here, the paper-seeming boy with the rat's eyes. We've already said that the children in the slum, they were deprived of the basic amenities of life, food being the primary. We've already said they were all very malnourished. So there was greed in the eyes of this boy. It seemed as if he was searching. The eyes were searching. So the paper seeming boy with the rat's eyes, both of them, the paper seeming as well as the rat's eyes, are metaphors used to describe how the boy appeared. Then the poet talks about a third boy, the stunted, unlucky heir of twisted bones. Stunted. What do you mean by stunted? Stunted means a child whose growth is below the normal growth of the children of his age. Now the poet calls him unlucky. Why? Because he is an heir of twisted bones, reciting father's gnarled disease. Means he has inherited a disease from his father, because of which he has got twisted bones. Reciting a father's gnarled disease. Reciting, repeating, inheriting the disease that his father had. So twisted and gnarled both means twisted, deformed. So here twisted and gnarled, two different words have been used to communicate the same meaning, that is deformed bones. So this poetic device is known as tautology. So in this line of twisted bones reciting a father's gnarled disease, twisted and gnarled have been used in the same line and they are communicating the same deformed disease, deformed bones. Fine. What disease is the child suffering from? He's suffering from a disease in which his bones are deformed and he's inherited from his father. So this is tautology, twisted and gnarled. Now, the word reciting. There is a pun in this word reciting. Why? First is the children are sitting in the class, so they are reciting their lessons. So one meaning that is used by reciting is reciting the lessons. And another meaning that reciting communicates is inheritance. The disease that the child has inherited. That is why it is a pun. You all know what is pun? One word that communicates two different meanings. So here reciting is communicating two different meanings. So that is why it is pun. I read the line again. The stunted, unlucky heir of twisted bones, reciting a father's gnarled disease, his lessons from his desk. What is this boy doing? This line, his lessons from his desk, tells us that he's sitting in the class reciting his lessons. Okay. So that is why it is a pun. He's reciting the lessons, that is one meaning, and reciting a father's gnarled disease, that is another meaning. So I hope you've understood the pun in the word reciting. Fine. So till now, the poet has talked about a tall girl, he's talked about a paper-seeming boy, he's talked about a stunted boy. Now he talks about another boy, another child. At back of the dim class, one unnoted, sweet and young. This boy appears to be younger than all. He's sitting at the back of the class. The class, how is the class? Dim. That means the class is not properly ventilated, not properly lit. That is why he is unnoted by all the others. And his eye, he's not as gloomy as the others. That is what the poet is trying to tell you. How? His eyes live in a dream. Means he's not bothered about what's happening in the class. He's not interested in what lesson is going on. He's lost in his own dream. And what is that dream? Dream is of squirrel's game. Now, squirrels, just imagine how squirrels move about, running around freely from one corner to the other. So, he is dreaming of that squirrel game. And where is the squirrel running around? In the tree room. What is a tree room? It's a small hole that the squirrels make for their home in the tree. So, this child is dreaming of what? Of freedom, of independence, of joy, of happiness, which is not a part of the children that are explained in this stanza earlier. All the others are giving an image of gloom and dullness and hopelessness, but this child, the youngest of all, who's sitting at the back of the class, he is giving us a picture of hope that he's dreaming about, that he wants to play freely and independently like a squirrel. I read the line again. His eyes live in a dream. What is the dream? That he wants to be as free like a squirrel who moves around in the garden, in the tree room, other than this. What is that other than this? Other than this is the children, like he's different from the others. Why? Because he is dreaming of something free, to be free, and he's dreaming of being independent. So that is why this boy becomes different from the others. We move on to the next stanza. On sour cream walls, donations, Shakespeare's head, cloudless at dawn, civilized domes riding all cities, belled, flowery Tyrolese valley, open handed map awarding the world its world, and yet, for these children, these windows, not this map, their world, where all their futures painted with a fog, a narrow street sealed in with a lead sky, far, far from rivers, capes, and stars of word. Sour cream walls. Now, what's the color of cream? We all know that it is white. But if you keep the cream for some time, it turns yellowish in color. So, what is the color of sour cream? Yellowish. And he's comparing the walls, the color of walls, to the color of sour cream. So, once again, comparison is there, and no like and as has been used. So, what figure of speech does it become? Metaphor. Sour cream walls. Why the walls have turned yellowish or are the color of sour cream? Probably because they are not maintained. The walls are dirty because they've not been painted for a very long time. And why do you think this has happened? Because probably the school has not received any grant or donations. That is why the walls have turned untidy, dirty, and they've turned pale yellow. So, what kind of an ambience such walls will create? Obviously, very dull. So, these dull walls have been decorated. And what have they been decorated with? There are certain pictures hanging on the walls. And what are these pictures? These are pictures of Shakespeare's head. Means a portrait of Shakespeare's bust is hanging on the wall. There's another picture which depicts a scene that is absolutely with clear sky, cloudless at dawn. Early morning scene has been depicted with absolutely clear sky. Then there are civilized domes riding all cities. Domes here means buildings. Civilized dome riding all cities. Now, what does this expression tell us? It is talking about the high rise buildings, the skyscrapers. Fine. So, there is a picture of a city having tall buildings. Now, civilized domes. Do you think the buildings can be called civilized? Not really. So, what does this adjective, we call it an epithet, what does this adjective civilized stand for? It stands for the people living in these buildings. So that means the poet is trying to say civilized people, but he has transferred that adjective civilized from the people to the domes, to the buildings. So this becomes transferred epithet. Is it clear? I'll give you some more examples. Like a farmer walking a tired road. The road cannot be tired. Farmer is tired. So from here, the tired word has been given to the road. So that is why it is a transferred epithet. One more thing to be noticed. Wherever there is a transferred epithet, there always will be a personification. Now, buildings are inanimate, they cannot be civilized. Civilized is an adjective that describes a quality in human beings. So, here domes have been personified. So, in civilized dome, there is a transferred epithet as well as a personification. Always remember, wherever there is a transferred epithet, there has to be a personification, but the vice versa is not possible. If there is a personification in any phrase, in any word, it doesn't mean that there has to be a transferred epithet. So please don't get confused. Okay, let's move on. There's another picture of the Belde Flowery Tyrolese Valley. It's a beautiful valley which has beautiful flowers, colorful flowers. So it's a very vibrant picture that has been put on the walls. Then there is an open-handed map. Open-handed map, it's a world map which is hanging. And what is the purpose of this map? This map is awarding the world its world. Now there are two words, world repeated. So this is a repetition. Awarding the world its world. Here a repetition has been used. Okay, now let's understand this line. What does it mean? Open-handed map, awarding the world its world. Awarding the world. Which world are we talking about? The slum. Awarding the slum children its world. Which is the world? The second world, the world that is shown in this map. Now, world map, it is showing the beautiful, vast, big world which is depicting all the countries, all the states. So, what are they trying to say? What is the poet trying to say? That this map is introducing the entire world to the children of slum. Okay. Now, before we move ahead, there's one thing need to be clarified. These pictures, Shakespeare's Head, Cloudless at Dawn, Civilized Dome or Riding All Cities, Belde Flowery Tyrolese Valley, and the Open-Handed Map. From where have these pictures come? Probably they have been donated by the rich people. And what are these pictures representing? These pictures are actually representing the privileged class, privileged children, the educated people. These pictures are representing the world that exists outside the boundaries of the slum. So don't you think that when these pictures do not represent the slum world, do you think the children of the slum can relate to them? So that is why they appear to be very irrelevant, despite the fact that they're decorating the walls of the elementary school classroom. So the children of the classroom of the slum are not able to relate themselves to these pictures. Okay, now let's move ahead. Open-handed map awarding the world its world. Fine. The map is introducing the slum children to the real world, that is the vaster world, the world that exists outside the slum boundaries. And yet, for these children, these windows, not this map, their world. As I said, that the children are not able to relate to them because they have never actually experienced that world, seen that world. So, what is the real world for these children? The world that they see, which exists outside the windows of the classroom. And what is the world that they see outside the windows of the classroom? The slum. So for these slum children, what is their world? The slum, and not the world that they are seeing in the map that is hanging on the wall. And what kind of world are they living in? The slum, where all their futures painted with a fog. What does fog mean? How do you imagine fog? Very blur, very faded. Things are not visible clearly in when there is a fog. So here the poet says that the future of these children is painted with a fog. What does that mean? The future is uncertain, bleak, not very clear. So here, future painted with a fog is again a metaphor. Now, what kind of life these children are leading? They are living in a narrow street sealed with a lead sky. Narrow street, congested, suffocated streets. That is how we imagine the slum. In the slum, like the streets are very narrow, the houses are very congested, it's very unhygienic, there is dirt all around. Fine. So, a narrow street sealed with a lead sky. Now, what does lead sky mean? Lead is, what is the color of lead? Just imagine your pencil, that gray color. Generally, sky is represented as blue sky, clear sky, but we never use lead sky. But here the poet has used it. So there is a significance of it. Why he has used? Probably for pollution. The sky is dark because there is a lot of pollution. And why there could be so much of pollution? Probably, the slum must be situated in somewhere close to the industrial area. So you can well imagine what kind of an environment these children are living in. So lead sky becomes a metaphor. The sky's color is compared to that of lead. It becomes a metaphor. Let's come to the next line. Far, far from rivers, capes, and stars of words. Far, far. Again, two words have been repeated, so it's a repetition. In the first stanza, also, the poem begins with far, far from gusty waves. That is also a repetition. These children are living in this slum, far away from rivers, capes, and stars of words. Rivers, of course, I don't need to explain what rivers are. They are representing nature. Capes again representing nature. So they're far away from the bounties of nature. Now, stars of words can be explained in another way. That stars, what are stars? One star is like the stars twinkling in the sky. Another is a very famous personality. Stars of words. Words here depict maybe education, literature. So they are far away from education. They are far away from those well known personalities belonging to the educated world, to the literary world. These children's lives are confined in the slum and they are far away from enjoying the bounties of nature, and they are far away from education. They know nothing about those famous personalities who exist in literary field, and that is why Shakespeare had also, I said, it is irrelevant for these children, because there's hardly any teaching or learning that goes on in these schools. So that is why this is how the poet has explained this stanza. I hope you've understood these stanzas. The third and the fourth stanza we will be doing in the second part of the poem. Thank you very much.